Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Loners. We appreciate y'all for being here. And this is episode 301. As you can see, in the States, the trade war things have not calmed it down at all.
As of us filming this.
Yeah.
Who knows? An hour later, it could have all dissolved, but...
I doubt that.
I know.
Yeah. So this video is by EU Made Simple. Oh, yeah. I just want to say, if you haven't, guys, make sure to like and subscribe. And also jump down and subscribe to our blog channel. We think you'll enjoy the videos that are coming out. Okay. So this video is by EU Made Simple. We've done a few videos from him before, but it's pretty much how Europe can replace U.S. trade. And this is an interesting topic.
Do you remember the good old days of transatlantic trade?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I was there, actually.
Well, it's not all over just yet, but maybe it's time to look for some alternative trade partners.
Oh my god, the dramatic.
The European Union is the world's trade champion. In 2023 alone, it racked up 7.6 trillion euros in trade, which is 16% of the global trade share.
Nice.
More than the US
Wow.
and China. And that's by a very good margin. And for all the criticism the EU gets, trade is something it does really well. That's thanks in part to the single market, probably the EU's biggest achievement after peace, and a growing network of 130 trade deals with countries across the entire world. Unsurprisingly, the EU does most trade with the US and China. But what is surprising is that there's no free trade deal with either, yet. Seeing the US at the top is especially worrying, especially with Trump flipping the tariff switch on and off, hitting European economies very hard. So in this video, we'll look at the EU's trade with the US and how we could diversify or even replace it. And yes, we think it's possible. In 2023, the US was the EU's biggest trading partner, accounting for about 17% of total trade.
Damn.
Goods and services flowed both ways, totaling 1.6 trillion euros. That's billions crossing the Atlantic every day. The EU exported 823 billion euros to the US, while the US sent 774 billion euros back. And just 5 sectors make up half of all the EU-US trade, led by medicines, pharmaceuticals, and of course, cars. And here's the problem. These sectors are already hit hard by tariffs. Trump has slapped on a 10% tariff across the board and a massive 25% on motor vehicles. This is some serious tough love for Germany, who is the EU's biggest exporter to the US. They are definitely...
Yeah, it's interesting because my mom works... kind of on like a utility board type of job for her town, and she was mentioning to me that I forget what, I think it was a 10%, they were importing steel from like Korea or something, and there was a 10% whatever tariff. So the cost was, they were doing 700,000, I think. 700,000, so then 10%, that was like, so they were doing like, there was like a 70,000 fee on top. Yeah.
Definitely feeling the pain. And it could get even worse. In 3 months, the US might reinstate a 20% tariff on all goods. And the Kiel Institute ran a worst case scenario. What if the US imposed 25% tariffs across the board and the EU hit back with the same? The result? A 17.5% drop in EU exports to the US and a 0.5% hit to the EU's GDP. Ouch. Now that's the extreme case, but let's run with it. A 17.5 drop means the EU would need to replace around 144 billion euros in lost exports. And can the EU fill that gap? We think so. And it starts with new trade partners. India really stands out among the many deals in the works, a massive country with huge potential. For example, India currently imposes import tariffs exceeding 100% on cars. That's crazy, right? But under the proposed free trade agreement, these tariffs could gradually be reduced to as low as 10% for European-made vehicles, opening up a significant opportunity for EU car manufacturers. And I'm sure Germany would absolutely love this. And the projections love it too, suggesting that total trade volume could rise to approximately 167 billion euros by 2026. This means India's exports to the EU could rise to 93 billion euros, and EU exports to India to 75 billion euros. And of course, this could help offset part of the 144 billion euro trade loss from the US, bringing that net loss down to around 130 billion euros. As for where things stand today, both the EU and India are aiming to finalize the agreement.
There's something I feel really odd with about India of like I feel like there's a lot of corruption in the politics there.
Of course.
Like almost I feel like either more than here or just as much as here, because they have like some of the most inequality I've ever seen. Like
the math doesn't math over there.
There's so many people, and there's so many in poverty, and there's such a big wealth inequality there. Like you see these Indian weddings where they're just like so extravagant. You have the Jonases going to them and other stuff like that.
Well,
like,
I mean, Nick Jonas is married.
I know, but I'm saying like with the amount of poverty I've seen there, it's just insane.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it just seems crazy. Yeah.
Agreement by the end of this year. And then there's another massive trade deal in the making. Mercosur, a pact between the EU and Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Studies estimate this could boost trade flows between the EU and Mercosur by 37%. And this time, it's not just about cars. Pharma would benefit too, with Mercosur's 14% tariffs on medicines set to be phased out completely, giving EU companies better access to over 260 million people. Projections suggest that the total trade volume could rise to around 126 billion euros by 2026. This means Mercosur exports to the EU would jump to around 49 billion euros and EU exports to Mercosur to around 77 billion euros. That would help offset the potential 144 billion euro trade loss from the US even further, bringing the net loss to around 109 billion euros. Now, we don't have time to dive into every single trade deal, but if we zoom out and just look at the potential boost to EU exports, here's what it could add up to. For Mexico, though, there are no official estimates, so we made a conservative guess, a 20% export boost, or in other words, 10 billion euros. But here's the problem. Even if all of these new trade deals get implemented, and that is a massive if, I'm looking at you, European farmers, they still don't make up for the full 144 billion euro hit that a full-on trade war with the US would cause. In total, we still be looking at a shortfall of around 53 billion euros. Ouch. But before we look at even more countermeasures, a quick shout out to the people who made this video happen. Our amazing Patreon supporters and YouTube members. Each week, our EU Made Simple members of Parliament get to vote on their favorite video idea on Discord. And this time, they picked this very video as their winner. How can the EU replace the potential trade lost with the US? So if you'd like to have a voice in what we make and support independent EU-focused journalism, consider joining us on Patreon. Your support truly means the world to us. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. So how can the EU replace those potential 53 billion euros in lost trade? And some of you are probably shouting, China! And fair enough. EU-China trade hits a massive 739 billion euros in 2023. And strikingly, there's no trade deal yet. And with a Europe-China summit coming up in this July, the relationship could truly deepen.
I feel like,
but here,
maybe it's just me, I don't know. I feel like a lot of countries are kind of waiting for Trump's tantrum to be over and for the dust to kind of settle, because it's hard to make any decisions right now that are going to last. But at the same time, you know, in the opposite outlook, it's like, okay, well, maybe they should do this regardless of what he pulls out of his ass, because when you deprive people or a country, whatever, an entity of something where there is a mutual benefit, they're just going to adapt at the end of the day. And if they can prove to adapt without you, even if it's not better but it's enough to sustain,
Yeah.
you don't have leverage anymore, or not enough leverage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then whoever's in office after you has to play cleanup and possibly settle for less. And this is all hypothetical. I mean, everything is hypothetical in this country at this point
yeah.
because we don't know where anything's going.
Here's the issue. We risk falling into the same trap as with the US. Too much reliance on one unpredictable partner.
Yeah.
And let's be honest,
Yeah.
China's stance on Russia
Yeah,
and Taiwan could shake the entire relationship overnight. So no, we really think there's a better option. You see, the EU has an ace up its sleeve. It's called the single market. With more than
think we've heard about
450
this
million
before, right?
citizens and 22 million companies from 27 member states. It is the largest common market in the world. I mean, look at this. Compared to the US, the EU has 110 million more people. But so far, it hasn't really mattered. As what does the US do best? They actually fully leverage their internal market. Smooth, frictionless, high-performing. Now you might say, don't we have the same thing? And here we would have to disagree with you. No, we don't. Our single market is far from complete, and it's costing us hundreds of billions of euros of lost potential every year. Let us explain what we mean. The single market is based on 4 freedoms: free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. We've more or less nailed goods. They can cross borders with ease. But the rest, honestly, we kind of suck. Take the second freedom, services. A plumber certified in Poland might not be allowed to work in Belgium without
that makes
getting
sense.
recertified.
So they need to make it more accessible for everyone within EU. So you're kind of like, instead of being where you're from in a country, you have like a leverage of being, well, I'm an EU citizen, so you can freely move within all of Europe. Yeah, that makes sense. That would help a lot, I'm sure.
Or at least
Even if they've been doing the
credential-wise, yeah.
Yeah.
job for 20 years. On top of EU rules, every country also has its own rules, standards, and red tape. In the US, it's different. A plumber from Ohio can work in Florida with minimal recertification and red tape required. It's not perfect either, but it's a way more unified market. Now take the third freedom, capital. A startup in Portugal trying to raise investment from Dutch or Austrian investors may struggle because every country has different rules for
Yeah, that's true.
taxation, bankruptcy, and investor protection. There's simply no unified framework for venture capital, and legal uncertainty makes cross-border funding harder than it should be. This means that promising businesses often scale within one country, not across Europe. Now compare that to the United States. A startup in Ohio can raise money from investors in California, Texas, or New York, all under one federal system, with uniform laws, common investor protections, and a single bankruptcy code. It's a huge reason why American companies grow fast and scale so big. And then there's the fourth freedom, people. In theory, EU citizens can live and work anywhere in the Union. In practice, it's often slow, expensive, and bureaucratic. Qualifications don't always transfer, and national rules still get in the way every single time. Meanwhile, in the US, someone from Illinois can move to Florida, rent an apartment, get a job, sign up for healthcare, and vote in elections, all without dealing with immigration paperwork and minimal qualification
Yeah,
checks.
it's one
Of course,
Mobility
yeah.
is simply built into the system. And in all honesty, even if we rewind back to goods, we are not 100% harmonized. Member states can still add national rules on top of EU standards. For example, nutritional labels vary. France uses Nutri-Score, while others prefer traffic light systems or their own formats. And let's not get started on language requirements. Sweden, for example, requires product labels to be in Swedish. In the US, this problem does not exist. It's all the same. In reality, the free movement of people, goods, services, capital, and even data, as promised in the EU treaties, is often more wishful thinking than everyday reality. And that comes at a cost, a massive cost. Estimates show this lack of integration could be costing the EU up to 1.1 trillion
Yeah, that's a
euros
lot.
per year. Yes, you heard that right. 1.1 trillion euros every single year.
I mean,
Y'all
just
need to get it
fixing,
together
yeah,
over there.
Just fixing that could
Dominate.
well, it would fix like the trade war loss with the US.
But again, that would require them all to get on the same page and
Yeah,
not have
change-
like a hierarchy over another place.
Yeah, they would have to pretty much become one country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not become one country, but at least operate certain
pretty much make their laws and
ways.
regulations as one
It
country.
doesn't even need to be all laws and regulations. It could just be about services and goods, you
and
know?
people moving around and other stuff like that. Yeah. But what he was saying, yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, even at the bare minimum, if you allow people to move somewhere for work, that I feel like could make a huge impact too.
100%, yeah.
Like freely, if it's, I don't know how the regulations work over there.
2019 report broke it down. Removing just 50% of barriers to free circulation of services, that's 279 billion euros right there. Clearing the remaining hurdles for goods, 300 billion euros. A fully integrated digital single market, 450 billion euros. And just switching fully to e-procurement could add 50 billion euros more. Now, if we added that 1.1 trillion euros to the mix to help offset trade losses from the US, suddenly that 144 billion euro gap looks tiny now, doesn't it? Now, does this mean we should turn inward and go full out Europe first? No. Not at all. There's huge value in striking trade deals around the world, including with the US if they're open to it. But here's the thing. We need to get our house in order too. And the top priority has to be finishing the single market. Capital Markets Union? Yes. Energy Union? Absolutely. Defense Union? Long overdue. Digital Markets Union? Let's finally complete it. And Services Market Reform? That one alone could transform the entire EU economy. We need to get serious about all of these, and fast, because completing the single market will have a far bigger impact on our GDP, jobs, and everyday life than spending years trying to make a trade deal with someone like Trump, who frankly doesn't seem at all that interested.
Yeah.
The EU has 100 million people more than the US. Let's make it count and finally finish our single market. Let me know what you think in the comments. And Germany is actually starting to get more serious about the single market. Check out their new coalition plan.
Well, we...
yeah, I think that would be a good idea for you Europeans to do that. Yeah, leave your comments below, though, please, of what you think would be the best route for Europe to take in the future, especially if Trump doesn't ease up on these tariffs and if things don't go well with us, which there's a very big chance that that's a reality moving forward with a lot of other countries than us.
Yeah, as of now, we haven't fully felt the effects of these tariffs, so
yeah,
obviously we'll keep you updated from our perspective. I
saw an article today that was saying the first ship from China hit California's ports with the 125% tariff on it, and it's like half full.
I think they legally go into effect on the 10th. So right around the time this might get posted, maybe a little after, before, whatever, I don't know. But it's coming for us, and people here like silently.
I don't think we understand what's going to happen.
I don't think anything can mentally prepare you for it, because until you're experiencing it, you don't really understand the weight of, you know, the issue. But I do think not enough people are like worried. I guess is the easiest way to say it. I get what you're saying. I think, like you're saying, everyone's just like, okay, but how bad is it really going to be? And it's like,
that's how I'm thinking too in my head. I'm like, oh, it's probably not gonna, like, I'm trying to see like the
I'm
positive
more worried about, because we can always adapt to stupidity in this country, but I'm more worried about how people are going to jump the gun when they start seeing things go up in prices, or certain things are not as accessible as they once were.
It's true.
And then they're going to let that behavior follow through in other aspects when it comes to like purchasing and yada yada and all that stuff. And also, I said this before in a couple videos ago, I already know corporations are going to price gouge and blame it on tariffs, even if their services have nothing to do with, or
100%.
very little to do with that. And that's what sucks. And that's what makes us the greatest country in the world.
All right. Leave your comments below, like and subscribe. I just drank some Vietnamese coffee concentrate, and I definitely feel weird in my body.
Just kidding.
It definitely works. That's strong.
It
feels like I just chugged a Red Bull.
Hey guys, it definitely works.
Shut up. Okay.
I told him to dilute it. He doesn't listen.
Like and subscribe. All right. Love you guys. Bye.
It's 4:00.